In today's episode, we are going to talk about how to go from a real estate agent to an investor. We're going to talk about why it makes sense if you're investing in real estate to hold a real estate license. What are some of the similarities that you can go from investor to agent? What are some of the lessons that I learned and Cody learned along the way that they were much cheaper to learn as a real estate agent than an investor? Different ways of monetizing leads, meaning like there's multiple ways of monetizing the same lead, some of the cost savings, control, liability, and then how you can capitalize on more opportunities. To help us with that, we got Cody Jornell. He is a investor, broker, and asset manager with Haven Management Group. Welcome to the podcast, Cody. How are you?
Thanks for having me on. I'm great. Just living the dream.
Hey. Okay, so we were talking a little bit off camera on how which happened first. And for our audience, if you wouldn't mind telling them, did you go from investing to getting your real estate license, or was it vice versa, and why?
So that was my dream going into it. You know, like a lot of investors that get started, I read Robert Kiyosaki's, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Purple Bible, they call it. And, everybody, it opens your eyes to assets versus liabilities. And it really, I read it probably 3 times and was like, this is what I want to do. I was just coming off from a college football career and, tried to make it in the NFL. I played overseas for a couple of years, but hadn't found that thing that really got me excited after playing sports. And that was it. So, wanted to jump into real estate investing full time, after reading that book and some others, but realized pretty quickly, hey, as confident as you can be, you actually don't know what you're doing yet. And you don't have enough capital, honestly, to really, do this the proper way. So I thought, hey, the next best thing is to get my real estate license, learn on the job. And, it was in, I think 2017 that I got that. So right before COVID hit, I got a couple years under my belt and things just kind of took off from there. And, the market, everybody knows that kind of spoke for itself at that point, but it was a good time to get in and again, learn on the job, and it really set me up for the successes that I'm having now.
Okay. So off note, what position did you play in college? And then the second note is, what did you learn, or what are you glad that you learned as a real estate agent that helped you become a better investor?
Yeah. So I was a place kicker,
Okay.
in college and in high school, kind of went to a small high school, did everything, running back, all that good stuff. But got a scholarship to go to Virginia Tech, which is based here in Blacksburg, Virginia, where I am now. And, had an awesome career there, played with a lot of big name, NFL guys, and we won some ACC championships, things along those lines. And it really, I can't speak for playing sports enough on that transferring over, not into just real estate, but business in general. If anybody walks through the door that was a disciplined, hardworking athlete, like they're going to be successful if they use the same
skills.
The same skills. And, we had our schedule was like down to the minute every week, whether it was 6 a.m. lifts and then class and then study hall and then practice and film. You were on a tight schedule. If you weren't on time, or if you weren't 5 minutes early, you were late, considered late, you were punished for it. And just the mental shift from being successful, taking on the pressure, knowing what work it takes to be successful at something, all that stuff translates over into real estate, and especially real estate investing. There's times where I'm sure, you and other investors have lost sleep at night, but, you don't let that cripple you. It's the same thing as walking out in front of 60,000 people and trying to hit a game-winning field goal.
100%.
It's a tough job, but you got to tune it out and you got to kind of just, put your head down and do the work. So.
Yeah. What are some of the lessons that you're glad that you learned as a realtor versus an investor? Because I could think of a couple myself that I'm just like, man, this would have been extremely painful had
Sure.
I made this mistake on the investing side versus as a real estate agent.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the biggest thing with that is, your values, just really honing in on your local market, knowing like what a proper resale value is. When I was getting into it, it took me, my dad was a contractor growing up, but, he usually had me swinging hammers and putting up drywall. I wasn't like running estimates and doing stuff like that. So one of the biggest thing I learned through, closing processes, trying to come up with, budgets, things along those lines is what do things cost realistically? And, whether you're under contract and you need to get some repairs done on a house before it closes, trying to have that conversation with your clients, but you do it enough, you start to figure out, hey, if we're looking at replacing some shingles on a roof, like it's going to be around this cost, and same thing with, making minor repairs. But then you get into trying to put that together with the CMAs that you've run, the resale values on the back end, what even like on the property management side, what can this rent for realistically once it's fixed up? That was all stuff I kind of was able to cut my teeth on with clients. So, I didn't always have the answer for them, but I was able to be resourceful, go out and figure it out, see what the market was bringing, see what similarities there were on the rent side. And, there's plenty of situations where I wasn't necessarily right. Not that my client lost money, but if I had been in the situation where I was going off those assumptions going into it, probably would have lost a decent amount of money on the transaction. But in this case, they had done their due diligence. Maybe we didn't sell it for as much as we thought, but they were able to come out ahead. I was still able to make a commission. So I actually made money, on a small mistake, or I guess you wouldn't call it a mistake, but maybe, just to kind of overthink what you're able to get on the property on the back end. So if you're doing flips or BRRRRs even, thinking that, hey, this is going to be worth this, and it only brought, the 10% less or something like that, that could be a big mistake if it's your capital that's tied up in that. So when I say learn on the job, I mean, that's really what it boils down to is being able to kind of see the full life cycle of those deals take place. Not from the sidelines, but you're kind of, assisting. It's not necessarily you doing the whole thing.
Yeah, I remember, and I told you off camera, I had a property that I listed that was across the street from a busy street. The property across the street sold at a great price. We listed the same property at the same price, and it sat there because it backed to a busy street.
Right.
Had I learned that on the investment side, that would have cost me some money, and that would have been a very expensive lesson at that point in
Absolutely.
my career, at a point where I probably wouldn't be able to, I didn't have the resources to be able to afford a loss of that magnitude at that time. So let me ask you, some people say that it's a bad idea to have a real estate license and be an investor. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I always go by the motto of like, I'm always taking care of people, being transparent, putting my best foot forward, whether, it's me trying to get a deal or help a client through the process. So unless you're doing something that, you really shouldn't be doing, I don't think that's ever a problem. There's, in Virginia specifically, it used to be that you couldn't wholesale with a real estate license. So they thought, the normal thought process was behind it was, hey, if you think you can get X amount for a property, then you need to have your client's best interest in mind. You should sell the property for what you're able to get it, from another investor. Well, when they went through the NAR changes and all those, rule changes with commissions and stuff, Virginia actually flipped that. And now you have to have a real estate license in order to wholesale, because they realized that the real estate agent that has gone through the training, has a license, has to answer to DPOR, they actually are more aligned with the interest of the client, even if they can put a small markup on it and go sell it to their network of investors. So I think that was like a really good example of, people kind of took a step back and said, hey, just because you have a license, that doesn't mean that, you shouldn't be able to do certain aspects of real estate. You actually have the homeowner's best interest in mind over someone who doesn't have it. So, I never think I don't think people should shy away from getting the real estate license just because of that. If you're going to be doing sketchy things to get yourself in trouble, then you're going to get in trouble regardless of if you have a
A
license or not.
license or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is you enter a meeting and you're able to provide consumers with options, meaning like
Absolutely.
I'm able to say, hey, look, I'll purchase your property for cash. This will be the price that I am willing to pay you, or I can list your property for you. And this is the price that you can get on the open market. And a lot of people don't get this, but it's surprising to them how some people will look at the price that you can get on the open market and say, no, I want the cash.
Right.
And
It's a
if you
sure
don't And if you don't have both, you'll miss out on that cash deal because you're only like, hey, you need to list it. You're going to make more money. You're going to put more money in your pocket. But in some cases, some people value other things outside of money or have different ideas or misconceptions or different ways that they want things to be done, which is really interesting. So let me ask you this. When you started off as an agent, what are some of the different ways that you can make money? And how is that expanded over time now? Because a lot of people, like I look at realtors, like they have their blinders on and they're just like, hey, I only help people buy and sell. If a flip comes up, they're like, nope, I don't do that. If a wholesale comes up, they're like, I don't do that. An apartment complex comes up, they're like, I don't do that. And it's just like this. So
right.
how has that evolved over time? And how are you able to monetize?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we actually run a training series that we're in the middle of right now called the Investor Tool Belt, and because the more you learn, the more tools you're putting in your belt. When you walk into any property, there's an opportunity to capitalize, or make some sort of profit on that, whether it's putting it on the market or selling it. Like you said, purchasing it yourself, doing a fix and flip, putting a little bit of capital into it, doing a buy and hold, doing a BRRRR, all these things, that you learn are tools that you can put in that tool belt. So when I go into a listing appointment, and I say that in quotations because, it's not always a listing that you get out of it. I have, three very distinct kind of solutions for the client. So like you said, when we go in, I can, if it's in our buy box and it makes sense, then I can offer them something right there. I say, hey, this is a sure thing. We can offer X amount if you are interested in selling it that way. If they want to hear the other options, the way our firm works, we do sales management and construction underneath Haven Management Group. So we can offer them to purchase the property, as an investment for ourselves. We can offer to or give them a good idea of what they could rent the property out at. If maybe it's a property that they've inherited, or they just don't know what to do with it, or they're moving and they don't necessarily have to sell it. That could be an option for the client, and we can do the renos that are needed for that. We can, lease it out and help them throughout that process. Or we can tell them, hey, if we're going to the open market, it's not as much of a sure thing, but this is what I think you could list it at, especially if you were to do these repairs or renovations up front, then we could pull X amount on the market. And it's very helpful for them just from a business standpoint that we can do all that stuff in house. But even if you break those silos down, on the investing side, we've now learned how to do fix and flips. So that's an opportunity. We've learned how to do some like light value add buy and hold stuff and BRRRRs. Same thing with multifamily. We've got some experience there. So really, the more you learn, the more you're able to capitalize on it. I tell agents all the time, if you're just going into listing appointments and buying and selling, like, you are leaving so much money on the table. Even some of the buy and holds that we've bought off market, we'll tell the seller, hey, I'm willing to pay, 100,000 or 150,000 for this. And they like that price. They would like to walk home with that. And, a lot of times we'd say, well, if you're willing to take 150, would you be willing to increase the purchase price to 155 or 160 and then pay us a $10,000 commission on the back end? You still get to net as much as you agreed to, but we're kind of baking that into our numbers because whether it's a flip or a hold, like, it's hard to buy groceries with those money. With that money, it takes a long time to turn a flip around. Buying holds, yeah, you're getting some cash flow, but it's not a lot up front. So I tell people that that's the money I pay my grocery bill with, that I feed my family with, and they're usually more than happy to do that as long as they net the same amount. So that's one of those. Hey, use your license as a tool. Make as much money as you can throughout this process. Add 5 grand on the front end and then do the flip, and then you make 5 less on the back end, but you've got that money up front to pay the bills and keep the lights on.
What I also tell people is that, like, as a real estate agent, like, you're gonna build. There's so much more. Like, I've had clients be private money lenders for me. I've had
Definitely.
clients refer me flips. I've had clients refer me just like a bunch of different things that it's like, oh man, it's actually like a good way to learn the business as you become more experienced and you can invest. Now, let me ask you this: like, knowing what you know now, what are some of the things that you wish you would have learned earlier in your career? Because at the beginning of my career, what happened to me is I took a lot of training from the real estate agent route, but I took very little training on the investment side. I would buy a rental property, I put 20% down on the rental property and just let it sit. And then
Right.
as I started learning more about investments, I'm like, oh man, like, you can do subject twos, you can do BRRRR strategy, you can do like private money, you can just a lot more creative. And I'm like, wow, like, hard money loans, I didn't know about any of that when I got started. What are some of the things that, like, you wish you would have maybe learned earlier that would have helped you earlier on in your career?
Sure. Yeah, I think, it's always the creative financing solutions, I think, that are probably the most applicable when you're getting started. You're, especially as a real estate agent, I'm sure a lot of them know that maybe don't have a second job whenever they start, but it's hard to buy a property in those first 2 years because the bank wants to see your income and they don't trust your commissions until you've been steady with those for a couple years. So, I really dug into the some of the creative financing types of solutions. But to your point, I was very focused on like maybe one strategy when I first got started. That was, like you said, the buy and hold. I wish I would have accelerated that more. I wish I would have done some more fix and flips when I saw the opportunity. Especially in that COVID market, it was like I kind of kick myself now for not. The demand was so high that you could almost name your price, and I was still like in my lane on buy and hold. This is what's going to make me a millionaire by 35, and it did work well for me. But there's other tools that you can have in your tool belt. And when you walk into a property, now you have multiple ways to make that deal work. It's not just, oh, this isn't a good buy and hold investment, so I'm not going to touch it. You could start to kind of finesse different ways to do things. So that's probably the major one is just making sure that you're learning enough that maybe you've got one strategy at that point, but you're able to kind of add those techniques to your tool belt and be able to capitalize on more deals than you would have if you were just focused on one.
It's funny because I heard a guy online say there's fast money and slow money. Fast money can be the flip or the realtor money. The slow
Absolutely.
money is the buy and hold, which over time, if you hold it over enough time, then that basically helps build wealth over an extent. But that's a really slow form of capital. I did the same exact thing where I held a lot more than I flipped earlier on in my career. And I didn't even know about hard money loans till 2017. I was already like 5 or 6 years into the business before I
Right.
learned about hard money loans. Okay, so now you've gotten more into like even like multifamily, right? Like larger apartment complex. Tell us about that transition and some of the benefits of doing that.
Sure. Yeah. I love multifamily. I mean, it's people look at it and they think it's a little scarier than the traditional single family stuff, but once you really boil it down, it's very similar. And it's actually less risky, when you look at the numbers and the economies of scale and things along those lines. But, like we mentioned, we started out buying a lot of single family homes. We were doing some light renovations. We were putting tenants in them, letting them appreciate, letting the tenants pay down the mortgage. And that was great up until, COVID times and a little bit thereafter when rates started to increase. Prices had already increased drastically. So it became harder and harder to find those houses that only need $10,000 worth of work to be able to put a renter in there long term, and make it cash flow. It was, the prices had gone up however much percent, and rates were at 7, 8%. It was almost impossible to find a slightly turnkey single family house. So we started looking at our portfolio. I think we had 20 properties at that time. And we said, look, these have appreciated quite a bit over the last 6 or 7 years. And we started looking at some multifamily deals on the market. Even with that market, it's hard to just jump into like a turnkey multifamily market. But throughout that first 5 to 7 years, we had built up a list of contractors. We had started the property management company. So we had in-house maintenance crews. So it gave us a little bit more confidence to look at deeper value add multifamily stuff. And our bread and butter right now is really like between 6 to 30 unit deep value add multifamily. So, a lot of them that we're purchasing, it's either too big of a project for the small mom and pop investors in our area, or it's too small. There's not enough unit count there for the larger, like, institutional guys to fool with. So there's this kind of, sweet spot in between that we've jumped into. And, when I say deep value add, I mean, we're kicking homeless people out of a lot of these units that, they're run down. They don't have electric. They don't, have any water, but we've got the crews to come in and buy that at a steep discount, get it fixed up, get it, back to where it's pretty much turnkey, feeling brand new. And then our property management company will come in and lease it out. And those, anybody that knows how cap rates work, like, you take something that's that distressed and then, add 10 people that are cash flowing the property now, the values are like, the equity multiples a lot of times are like 200, 300% of what we're purchasing. So it's been a really good strategy. And I think that's kind of our bread and butter to really grow the portfolio that way.
Yeah. So walk us through a deal. I saw a video on your Instagram right before we popped on the show, and it said like, "Oh, I purchased this apartment complex with zero money out of my pocket or zero money down." Walk us through a deal, like meaning like purchase price, like number
Sure.
of units, percentage occupied, cap rate purchased. What cap rate did you purchase it at? What was it bringing in? What is it bringing in now? What is it valued at now? And then how did you structure the deal in terms of partnerships, syndications, et cetera?
Yeah, so there's two that come to mind. I think the one that you're referring to most recently is the 25 unit that we've got.
Okay.
We're in the middle of right now, and that one was a little bit more creative on the purchase side. So maybe I'll do that one after I talk about the more traditional one that we found. But in Radford, which is Radford, Virginia, it has a university here nearby, about 20 minutes from Blacksburg and Virginia Tech. And there was a 6 unit building that a commercial broker, his father owned it, and he had bought it at auction. And it was completely gut, uninhabitable. And we bought that for, I think it was 310,000, and came in and put about another 350 to 400 in it. So we were all in about 750. I think it was what we came out to close to. Did the acquisition. We used it's not a hard money lender, but it's one of the guys that funds our fix and flips. So
Yeah.
it's basically 10% down on the acquisition cost. So, about 30K, 31K down plus closing costs. And then they give us 100% of the construction budget. Yep, exactly. So interest only payments for 12 months. The project took 8 months to do all the construction, renovations, everything. And then on the back end of that, our property management company came in and we got the place fully leased out within 2 more months. So we're sitting at month 10 at that point. Had the place fully leased. When we bought it, I guess the cap rate was zero because it didn't have any income whatsoever.
Yeah.
But we put a bunch of tenants in there and it was cash flowing pretty well. Went back to the lender and did an appraisal. The appraisal came back at 1.25. We had 740 in it at this time. So whenever we did the new permanent loan, they put an $800,000 loan on it. So we actually got $50,000 back after paying off the interest and the construction loan and all of that. And that's tax-free money that we get back because it's technically a loan. So, we purchased at 310, put 330, 340 into it, refinanced it at 800, and the appraised value was at 1.25, which I think was a pretty reasonable and conservative cap rate. It's like a 7% cap rate or something like that. So, when we go to do the resale, I'm assuming that we can sell it at a little bit lower cap rate, which would increase the value of the resale. But yeah, that was a great one for us. That was actually our first big multifamily project that we did. When I say big, I mean heavy in construction.
How many units again on that one?
That one was 6 units total.
6 units. Good for you. Okay. It's amazing. And then you said you bought it from somebody who bought it at auction and it's basically a broker, basically.
Yeah, they have their own brokerage, commercial brokerage. They do a lot of development and investing in the area as well. And it was just a project that they bought, and I don't know if it didn't fit into what they wanted their portfolio to be, or if he was just strung too thin at that time. But presented the opportunity to us, and we kind of ran with it from there.
What are the gross rents on something like that? Like meaning like it's valued at 1.2. Like is it bringing in like $12,000 a month, 15?
Yeah,
Gross.
so the units, we rented those units at 1,400 a piece, and
Okay.
they're 2 bedrooms, 2 bed,
Okay.
1 bath. So you can do that math, but yeah, it's decent. I mean, and the cost, it was in an opportunity zone, so the taxes didn't increase on us. We've got a pretty long runway on that. We kept the bills down, everything separately metered, which it wasn't before. So those utility costs, like not a landlord not having to pay those, increases the value dramatically. So it turned out to be a good project.
Now, let me ask you this. Does it still pencil with the rates the way that they are? I mean, like, does it cash flow the way that rates are right now?
Yeah, so that was probably 2 years ago. I mean,
Okay.
it was pretty close to when the
Break
rates were
even.
going up. Yeah, so
Okay.
we've got a 5 year arm on it. We locked in a pretty decent rate, but it wasn't 3%. That type of thing. I wish we had done more of these at that time, but yeah, that's going to be an issue, I think, coming up within the next. I mean, it's happening now. I'm part of Rod Khalif's
Yeah.
mastermind, his multifamily warrior group, and we were down in Sarasota about a month or two ago, and some of the guys got up and they were talking about. One of them was an attorney, and he was saying, we're starting to specialize in
Bank
uh,
foreclosures,
yeah,
taking back.
well, people that have projects that have gone south. So, people they're looking for bridge loans, or they bought a property that penciled out at 3.5%, and now their adjustable rate is coming due and it's going to be at 7.5.
7%.
Yeah, and the numbers don't make sense. And I think one of the stats that he mentioned was um, banks are selling properties for less than the debt on them now, and they're doing just as much now as they were. And this is commercial multifamily stuff, but
Yeah.
they're doing just as much now as they were in 2010, like right after the crash. So, you can kind of take that as how you will, but I don't think it's a great sign for those projects that,
Commercial.
yeah, and but it's an opportunity for someone too, right? So, if you can get your foot in the door and you've got the capital and the team that can come in and buy these for less than the debt that's owed on them, then you've got a good project to put a
take
good foot
over.
forward. Yeah, and if the rates are where they are now, hopefully we can see some adjustments down, which would make the properties work even better.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: like, how do you specialize in something like that? Meaning, like you said that he was becoming a specialist, because I'm seeing it as well too, where a lot of people got hit hard with that. Meaning, like they bought and they're like, "Oh my god, this is a great investment. It pencils
Right,
out at 3%." But the problem with commercial real estate is that depending on what type of loan you have, every 5, 7, 10 years, the rate adjusts to whatever market value is at that point.
right,
And then at that point, there's a little bit more risk if rates go up. So, like if rates go up from 3 to 7, then that could take you from positive cash flow to negative cash flow now on a month to
very
month
quickly.
basis.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and I'm not. I mean, I guess fortunately, I'm not sure what kind of tactics that he uses on that. I know, I haven't had to go into that situation, but I think his experience, he's been doing it 25 years now, but he's probably had some experience dealing with some of those similar problems. And now that it's becoming more prevalent, he's kind of
he's
marketing
perfectly
that,
equipped.
yeah, as part of his offering, and I'm sure some of his clients that were existing are going through that. But he did mention that there were certain types of bankruptcy that you could file based on, multifamily commercial properties that doesn't necessarily affect the rest of your finances. So I'm sure some of that is involved. I'm sure some of it is being the liaison between him and the bank, and the other partners involved, because when you get into those
Syndication
really
sometimes.
sticky situations, like some people want to do one thing and some people feel more comfortable doing something else, and there's disagreements arise, and I would not want to be in his shoes being in the middle of all that, but I'm sure it's an important piece to be able to get out of it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: like, what about a creative finance deal that you've done? Walk us through a project like that.
Yeah, so that's actually the second multifamily, and I've done plenty of creative financing on buying holds and fix and flips and stuff like that. Seller financing, people holding notes for me for a certain amount of years before it balloons. But the one, and I'm actually sitting in the building right now. We moved our office over here, but I had a current now a current client approached me, and they had this 27 unit apartment building, near where our office was before. But they came to us very very transparent and just said, hey, the previous property manager, asset manager that we had running this has basically run the place into the ground. We're losing over $100,000 a year on this property. They could not sell it for the debt that they had on it at the time, and really didn't have the capital that they needed to turn the property around. So when we came in, I did my assessment, kind of walked the property. I mean, there were only, I think, 7 or 8 out of the 27 units that were leased out,
Mm-hmm.
and they were running it as a short-term, mid-term rental for whatever reason. It was, I guess, to the advisement of the other property managers. But we looked at it and said, hey, you're going to have to like renovate pretty much 90% of these units to be able to get market rents for them. A lot of them just weren't even livable how they were. It's going to cost this amount. If we were to do it, we would phase it out, do it, in batches. We would renovate 3, get at least, renovate 3, get at least. And it's going to cost this much to do the project. And they looked at it and they were like, okay, well, we need to figure something out. I had a lot of conversations about how to actually execute it, from like a money standpoint, and they really just didn't have the funds to do it. So apart from like, going into bankruptcy or foreclosure, like we're talking about some of these other guys, we said, well, what if we did this? What if our group, which is me and 2 or 3 other investors, brought the money to the deal to do the construction, and then also kind of cannibalize the negative cash flow for the time it's going to take to get it stabilized. We bring that to the table for a majority equity position in the property. And we kind of had our rents, we had our runways, basically bought into the property at about $1 million valuation, just because that was kind of what they had the debt left on it from. So we bought the equity with those funds, and then we've started our construction, repurposing and putting leases on the properties. We're up to about, I think, somewhere between 70 and 75% occupancy now. That project started last December. So basically, we bought in, and that was the video that you were watching. I said, this is how you can get infinite returns on your money. We bought in with equity. We put probably 250 to 300 in as to do the construction, do the negative operating expenses. And then we're hoping within the next 6 to 8 months, when we get up to 90, 95% occupancy, we can go back to the bank, and basically the loan that they have on it now at a million, 1.5, once you count in, all the construction funds, we'll be able to refinance, pull the money out that we've put into it, and it's going to cash flow much better than, what it is with the current debt that's on the property. So it's a way to, come in, get our money back as investors within the first year, and then hold the property long term and cash flow, and reap the benefits of the cash flow as well. So that was you know all the experience from the single family stuff, the creative deals that we've done that way, kind of came into this multifamily project, and we were able to do it on a much bigger scale than what we've done on single family projects in the past. So that one's still ongoing, but it's a really cool concept to be able to, not only benefit from our end, but these guys were in really deep trouble.
Oh yeah.
They're about to retire. So really one of their biggest pain points was like, this was always going to be our retirement plan. They have a decent amount of capital saved up, but we really wanted some residual income coming off of this thing. So that's why we kept them on, as minority equity partners, in order for them to allow us to do the project as well. And then, everybody wins in that situation. So we were really proud of that, and we'll be very proud once it all comes to fruition.
It sounds like they wouldn't have sold it outright, right? Because of their retirement goals. Basically, they wanted to basically stay in the deal. Because the way I was thinking about structuring, just taking over their debt, basically.
I had
And then,
presented a couple different scenarios like that, and this was really like the sticking point for them, was to be able to have some cash flow as they went into their later years. So
that's amazing. Now,
yeah,
let me ask you this: when you say that you bought into the deal at a valuation of $1 million, I've heard that from like a business context, like maybe like a Shark Tank type of scenario where like, hey, look, we're valuing your business at X price and we're buying into it at X price. How does that work in real estate?
yeah. I mean, when I say that, it might have maybe not the best choice of words, but essentially we were buying in at what they had the debt left on the property. So we called that the value of the property, because that's the debt that was left on it. But when we get it stabilized, we're running our cap rates around 7%, just because it's fairly conservative for this area. And the property is going to be worth anywhere between 3.6 to $4 million at that point. So, we're looking at it from our standpoint of, hey, if we can buy in, get our money back out, and we've almost tripled the value of this property,
Yeah,
that's a heck of a win for everybody.
100%. Not only that, but you got all your money back out basically of the of the deal, basically.
Right. And it's a loan. That's the beautiful thing about doing a cash out refi, is that money that you
No
get
capital
back.
gains.
Yeah, there's no capital gains tax on it. It's a loan. So, you loan that money to the business, and it's not always applicable with the setup that you have, but that money that we're bringing to the table is considered a loan, to the business. So when we do the cash out refi, we can pay ourselves that loan back, and it's not taxable. So.
How is the paperwork structured? Like, so is that considered a joint venture now, basically, and is it considered a sale as well too? Where now, um, the other people are, and then do the other partners existing partners have any say in any of the decisions, like control wise? Who's got the control on the
Right.
asset?
Yeah. So this is where we're starting to peel the the onion back a little bit. This one, it got really. I mean, I learned a lot like going through this as well. So they actually bought this place before LLCs existed,
Okay,
which I was like, I mean, shit, I thought that was a lot longer
that's a
ago.
lot.
But yeah, I was like, it's not a 100-year-old property, but so it's in an S corp, and I did not understand before this deal how much of a problem that is having real estate
Rental property in
in
an
an
S
S
corp
corp versus an
versus an
LLC.
LLC.
Yeah, so we
Why is that a problem? Just so our viewers understand.
it has a lot to do with the way it was depreciated, and you can't you don't get like the same stepped up basis as you
Got
would
it.
if you were to like do transfers, and even when we're buying in as partners, like we're essentially buying stock in their S corp, not just
In the actual
becoming
property.
not becoming like a joint venture partner or a traditional partnership like you would in an LLC. So it actually took us like 3 or 4 months to really like ink the deal because we were dealing with CPAs and things along those lines. And a lot of people and even advisors that I talked to, they were like, "Well, you're basically buying into a property that's already been depreciated." And so we had to take a step back and look at it and say, does that still make sense for us? Like, it's definitely not a positive thing, but all the factors that we just mentioned going into it, getting our money back, being able to have the equity multiple that we're talking about, being able to hold it long term and be majority partners, it all kind of overrided the
The
complexities
depreciation.
in
Yeah.
an S corp. So there was some negative drawbacks to that, but we still thought it was a good enough deal to capitalize on.
Got it. What about a BRRRR? Have you ever done a BRRRR?
Yeah, we've done quite a few of those. More towards again before prices and rates went up, it was a lot easier to do those.
It was funny because that was one of the strategies that had I known how to do a BRRRR, I think my portfolio would have grew a lot bigger
Right,
because of me being able to get all my money back out tax free. And then I
absolutely.
would have just bought, fixed, renovated, and instead of flipping it, just keep it basically.
Right,
Uh, I didn't know about BRRRRs or hard money loans. So those are a couple of the things that I wish I would have known at that
I
time.
agree. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we started doing those, but that's basically what we're doing with these multifamily properties too. It's essentially the same thing. There's just a lot more of the R renovation into it than the single family home.
Yeah. So where I think like, cause I've thought about like, if I was this real estate agent starting off, I'm like, okay, like what niche would I want to focus on? And I think that more you learn about investments, rental property, owning it, creative financing, private money lenders, I think that that's actually better than getting into like the luxury space, to be honest. Like personally, like I see a lot of agents wanting to get into luxury because of the high commissions. You
Right,
can make the same amount flipping a property. You can make $100,000 flipping a property. You can make
right,
$100,000 wholesaling a property. So to me, it's an easier model or market to penetrate, and you can make equally as much, or in some cases even more, than the
sure.
luxury space as well too. Any final words? And then if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that as well too?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, on the theme of everything that we talked about, I think just, being a sponge, learning as much as you can about the investing world. At the very least, it's going to help you be a better realtor.
Mhm.
You're going to be able to go to appointments, people that have issues, you're going to have multiple solutions for them. You become more of an advisor than just a realtor. And that's really where you make your money in this business is being able to help someone through their unique, specific process or problem. If you can be that problem solver, then they're going to refer you over and over again. So that would be, the number one thing. What you were talking about with, having the strategies. I tell people a lot of times, like, look at your situation. We've got a quiz that we give a lot of the investors that want to, start out or work with us. It's called the Investor DNA Quiz, and it asks you, a set of questions and kind of spits out a what they think the best strategy for you at this time are. If you're just getting into it, you don't have a lot of capital, but you need to build up a reserve or money to go do more deals, then maybe wholesaling or flipping is the right thing for you at the time. If you've got a lot of capital but not a lot of extra time, or you don't want to be hands-on, maybe you should start learning and looking into some joint ventures, syndications on multifamily deals, things like that. So there's a time money matrix that we use a lot, and it's really how much capital do you have, how much time do you have, and where do you fall within that. And it's there's not always a one size fits all thing. It's just a matter of like making it fit what the current situation is. So that's been a lot of the advice that we give. To find me there, I'm all over social media. It's my name at Cody Jornell. We've got Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channels. Haven Management Group is our business name. We've started a school group, mostly started here locally, where we post off-market deals and we do trainings and Q&As and a lot of investor resources like real estate calculators and things like that live in there. And that's Haven Investor Network at school.com, SKOOL.com. And we're really focused on rolling out right now is that kind of suite of services. We don't want to just be deal makers for clients. We want to come back them with boots on the ground real estate services as well. We want to help you find the deals. We want to help you with contractors. We want to help you manage the property, sell the property. And it really helps just get the investor into our ecosystem and helps build them up in their portfolio as well. So social is always the best place to reach me if anyone wants to reach out or has questions or just connect. Yeah, more than happy to talk.
Amazing. So I'm pretty excited about all the things that you're doing. Congratulations on all that. I've enjoyed having you on the podcast as well, too. I feel like it's a very similar journey to ours, where we started off as a real estate agent, learned a lot of things, then transitioned into that investment side. I would say that my business opened up once I started learning more about investments, and I would imagine that for some of our viewers, it would open up as well, too. If you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this podcast would be helpful, make sure to hit that share button. We had Cody Jornell. We talked about how to go from a realtor to an investor. Thank you so much, guys. And to our viewers, until next time.
Yeah, thank you.